to be happy, her to discover who I am. Relationship began to turn so slowly. Now, this is not about she and I, but
now we're going to go, and it's something how the progression of these workshops are going, but we're going to talk now about deepening our level of relational intimacy through open conversation with James Bernard Kynes. And I'm really interested to hear what he has to say, because intimacy is a very important thing, regardless of what type of relationship you're in. So let's put our hands together and welcome Mr. Kynes as he comes.
stress is another main killer to us as a people. And what I want to talk about, you all have already presented in every conversation this morning. What I want to do as I talk about this is I want to use some of the clinical language terminologies that you may not hear in day-to-day conversation, but what you validated through your testimonies, through your sharing, through your stories is the persons who have researched and studied theories about some of everything you've already addressed. I heard attachment theory, the story with Mama Tina and Kim showed the power of touch. All of this is related to intimacy. The complexities, I've heard Brother Classico say yesterday in his sharing, I can't see in you what does not live in me. So if I don't like what I see in you, I'm really not liking what I see in myself. We call that mirroring. We mirror back and forth to each other every day. Every human contact and every human relationship, we're constantly taking in. That's a form of intimacy. So, who am I? I am a bastard child. And I say that with endearment because we all know what that term means and has meant in our community. I was an adopted child. Part of my story is that I was born as a result of an affair. Both my parents were educators and had a love relationship with each other. Back in 1955, when abortion was not part of the vocabulary in our community, my mom and my dad loved each other, but the principal and his wife did not want them to be a couple. So the principal and his wife orchestrated that my mom and dad would not be together because they wanted my father to marry the secretary of the school, which he ended up doing. 3 years later, my mom, as she shared with me, she continued to have conversations with him. And in the month of February, on this one occasion, while I was up in the cosmos waiting to come to Earth, I saw them going to FAM for I think she said they had to go to a continuing education class. And I just said, hey, y'all, I want to come to Earth. So why don't y'all get together on this one time so I can get to Earth? And lo and behold, Out of all of those sperms swimming for that one egg, I won. And I'm here. I say that both kiddingly and for real because we are souls first before we are human beings. Which is very biblical that when God created humankind, we were souls. And so we, as Brother Classico said yesterday, we are co-creators. We are also co-creator with the Creator in our choice to come to earth and the parents with whom we selected. So while we're here, I want to share with you, I've been thinking about this subject of intimacy for a while, and I didn't know if I wanted to read this, but I'm going to read it since I took the time to write it, and it's in the packet, but I just kind of listen along and you can look at it a little bit later. And what I'd like to invite you to do, as you were doing in meditation, whatever comes to mind, whether it's from the testimonies and the stories and the experiences that you've heard, or what I'm about to share with you, see what comes to mind and just hold to that. If it's just one thing, one thought, hold to that on the subject of relationship intimacy. Intimacy, by definition, refers to a close, familiar, and usually affectionate or loving personal relationship with another person. A close association with, detailed knowledge, or deep understanding of the quality of being comfortable, warm, or a token of familiarity, affection, or the like. The problem within our African American community as relates to intimacy, I think, goes all the way back to the psychological residuals of slavery. To the psychological residuals of slavery. We don't talk about our experience in slavery that much. We are ashamed of the experience, but it is indeed a part of our legacy as African Americans. We have not been out of slavery as long as our ancestors were in it. We're just over slightly a century and a quarter of being out of slavery. We're not talking about 6 or 7 generations. And so therefore, even though we are not in handcuffs physically, but in some ways we are when we look at our penal system, as he can testify to. Our minds psychologically, in so many ways, remain enslaved. And I've been saying to a lot of my clients of late, especially in marital relationships, one of the difficulties of being married is that we have not learned how to relax the tension of the psychological lockness that has passed down, is genetically within us in our relationship emotionally as a result of the psychological residuals of slavery. Psychological is another term we don't like to use in our community. But psyche, the root is soul. So it is from that context that we are psychological as well as spiritual and emotional, relational human beings. And so we are psychological persons. And we do have psychological illnesses that we need to transform. And so some of the problems and some of the challenges that I was hearing Valentino talk about, so real, are so entrenched. They get locked into good or bad, positive or negative attachments. And even as we want to help, it takes a lot of pulling, because in all attachments, there's one key thing that we want to have. And what is that? Control. The other word starts with an A. Attention. Whether it's good attention or negative attention, we want attention. Attention is an expression of my longing and my hunger for emotional intimacy. The problem with seeking a deep level of intimacy in a relationship is that many individuals live by the myths regarding intimacy. That is to say, and these are quotes that I hear every day, I thought that I would not feel alone. We need to have more intimacy. Something's missing. We need to be growing. We seem to be growing apart rather than closer. I want more intimacy, not necessarily sex, but not to feel like this, lonely. Moreover, the social images associated with intimacy is seen, for instance, with visual expressions of couples locked arms in arms and warmly embraced with each other in public spheres. This is an expression of closeness, relational warmth with another relationship or familiarity. Yet when this is lost, couple usually utter, we used to have such a close relationship, or we used to cuddle all the time, and I don't know what has happened. We're fighting now, either physically or verbally. What's gone wrong? I often hear individuals using this term primarily in relation to sexual intercourse. It appears to me that when individuals express a desire of and a longing for more intimacy, they are simultaneously unclear about what they are saying that they want. In short, they are anxious and seem unaware that they are anxious about what they say they want. They are closer to intimacy than they realize, as expressed in their anxiety on the side of fear. In other words, when couples come to counseling, which is what I do every day, they don't realize that in the moment that they come into the room, that they are expressing and experiencing a level of emotional and relational intimacy. Because they have dared to do something about their situation. They've decided to come and sit and talk for 45, 50 minutes and reveal themselves. And one of the biggest issues that we have is, I think I heard someone say either this morning or yesterday, is that we don't want to put, quote unquote, our business in the street. But every person needs a relationship. We might not need people, but we need relationships. Now you say that may sound like a contradiction, but no, it's not. The experience, the testimony this morning was an expression of an intimate relationship. An intimate relationship. First, relationship intimacy or familiarity takes place at birth between mother and her newborn infant. It is therefore important that the relationship space between mother and child is protected. Now, my grandfather intervened when my mother became pregnant with me and sent her to New York because he didn't want her to lose her job. And therefore, at birth, we were eventually separated. Even though it was an in-family adoption, I lost that intimate relationship with mother. And even though I didn't know her growing up, I knew that those who were around me were not the biological folk. When I was about 14 and had an experience with her, she came by and I followed her outside. I remember she went outside to get something out of the car. And I went behind her and I couldn't understand why I felt so happy. Years later, I learned that her scent was on my brain. Wow. You see, from the second trimester, when mothers are carrying their children through birth, and the first 9 months are very, very important between mother and child. Neuroscience, I know that everything that's going on with the mother is being transmitted into the developing fetus's brain. So therefore, when the infant is born, when you and I are first born, we don't see. And so our primary means of survival with the mother is through what? Smell and touch. That's how we know. That is the beginning of the intimate relationship between mother and child. And the reason fathers are important, it's important for fathers to be in the home, is so that the father can be hopefully emotionally available to take care of both mother and child during these early forms of development. So if dad is absent, and even if he's there physically, but he's not emotionally available, that is to say, if he's not there nurturing mom, taking care of the babe when mom is tired, because mothers lose on the average in the first 6 weeks 700 hours of normal sleep. She is tired and burnt out. And so baby and mother get tired of each other. So if dad is not there, and we have a lot of single household mothers who do an outstanding job, but if dad is not there to participate, the emotional intimacy from birth is crippled. And so that follows us internally on into adulthood. So in each developmental phase is why we seek some level of a relationship with some other person that would help us to feel nurtured, cared for, understood, loved. We're going to find it because the brain demands it. We're going to get it by any means necessary. Intimacy, emotional intimacy is very important. And so because we're looking for secure attachments. And so we want to protect that space when mother and baby are first together. Moreover, relationship intimacy is expressed during times of crisis. That crisis create another problem. When individuals encounter difficult personal situations, for example, death of parents, children, spouses, job losses, forms of grieving, they long for a familiar and understanding other to provide space for in a place of safety so that they can experience a bonding and loving relationship with someone who understands and cares and can be of support to them. What are some of the myths about relationship intimacy? Well, we'll look for relationships and we bring ourselves into relationships and we think that the relationships will keep me from not feeling alone and that it would make me feel happy. We're not born necessarily to be happy. So I like what my brother said. We're born to help to reproduce productive, giving individuals. Happy, to me, is like cotton candy. You know, it's sweet, I'm happy for a moment, and then it's gone. It has no substance like the products that you were talking about. In a day and time, we need internal substance. So that's one myth about intimacy, that if I'm just close, I'm not going to feel alone, I won't feel lonely, and I'm going to be happy. Relational intimacy will rescue and save my marriage relationship. My wife and I have been married for 36 years, and all 36 years have been peaches and cream. Say yeah, right.
It sounded good.
It sounded good. Yeah, boy, it has been peaches and cream.
That's awesome.
Like my two oldest sons, they told me one time, they said, Dad, we used to just, y'all used to fuss so much, we just wish y'all were going to get divorced. And I said, well, thank you. I'm glad for your honesty. But we decided to hang in there. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I'm so appreciative to my wife for is helping me. And notice how I use this term, use her to discover who I am. Without her being in an intimate relationship with me, it would have been difficult for me to fully come to know who I am. Pardon me.
That's so right.
And so my affection for her runs so deep.
Yes.
saw her when I was in the 7th grade. This is a true story. We were walking from school one day, and she was with her sister. I'm a couple of years old, and I happened to look back and I saw her. Now, I didn't think then that that's going to be my wife one day, but I do remember that I liked her. So a few years later, we were in the same school, and I started pursuing her, and she wouldn't give me the time of the day. I went to one of her classrooms, I was knocking on the glass window, and I was begging for a dime so I could buy extra milk. And the guy that was liking her came up from the hallway, and he saw me knocking on the window. He just started laughing out loud at me, you know. I said, that's all right. So we went on, and we eventually became boyfriend and girlfriend in high school. And we became parents while we were in high school. And after high school, our second son was born. And I knew I needed to go to the Army because I grew up without a father, and I said there would not be another male raising my sons, and I'm going to take care of my family. So I joined the Army. Intimacy grew between us, but it was a struggle because we were full of anxiety. We didn't know ourselves, okay? And it was about our 25th year anniversary. I didn't know I was going to give all this testimony. This ain't on the paper. But it illustrates what I'm talking about in terms of how intimacy is not easy. It's not just handed to us on a platter. It's continuous hard work. We went on our 25th anniversary. We went out to Lake Tahoe, and I don't know if you remember this, but we were out on the boat, and Lake Tahoe is just beautifully blue. And I was reminiscing on the story why I was attracted to her, because in her household, she was really the one who could she seemed like the protector of herself and her siblings, because her grandmother was always raising Cain, but she would be the only one who would take a stand. And I admired that, because in my household, I grew up an only child, and I couldn't say anything back because Hosa would knock me through the wall. Mm-hmm. And I told her how I admired that about it, and in one sentence, we had the most intimate moment from my perspective that we experienced. And she said to me, she said, I only did that because I was scared. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, I didn't say anything back in my household because I was scared. Mm-hmm. And then it was in that moment that I learned that what we were truly attracted to each other was deeply unconscious, couldn't be seen with the natural eye. We were attracted to each other by our fears. Mm-hmm. And we define our fears as love. It is what we can't see that attracts us to the people with whom we become intimate with on a deeper level. And it was in that moment that my fantasy bubble burst. My myth about relationship intimacy just went out the window. And for the first time in 25 years, I could see her for the person she was, not as some fantasy that I had lived out of for 25 years. And our relationship began to turn so slowly. Now, this is not about she and I, but, you know.
It's all right. It's all right. That's not great. That's not right. Hallelujah. It's all right.
Relationship intimacy, as I recap, and I want you to talk with us, begins in infancy. Mother and child mirrors back and forth to each other. And hopefully father is around to share in that moment. We depend on the emotional availability of the mother primarily and others second. That's why Kim's story with her son was so important when she said that her son said to her, now that I found my mother, now I can go get married. It was not until I reconciled with my mother about my adoption that I further could be available to be with my wife. We have to heal the original relationship. That's where intimacy begins, with our mothers and our fathers. If you don't know your mothers, if you don't know the biological, if they're alive or deceased, we still have to heal those internal relationships. This is where counseling comes in. People that come to let me be with them don't come because they're crazy. They're just like you, they're just like me. They just come because they want to go deeper to heal those broken relationships on the inside.
That's right.
Developmental stages of our maturation goes beyond birth. It's extended with our siblings, our neighbors, our spouses, our children, and true friends. How many of you have seen The Lion King? My favorite. Every scene in that is about intimacy. The key scene to me is when Mufasa strictly tells Simba not to go where? To the elephant graveyard. And Scar sets him up because he wants to be king. So he gets out, and Mufasa says to Zazu to take Nala home. I gotta teach my son a lesson. Simba. Simba begins to walk to him, and he has a moment of insight and awareness when he steps into his father's footstep. And he looks down at him, Simba, you deliberately disobeyed me. But notice he was angry first. And he used the word, I'm very disappointed with you. You could have been killed today. He said, but I was only trying to be brave like you. And he says, I only am brave when I have to be. He said, but you're the king. You can do anything. He said, being king doesn't mean you can do what you want to do. He said, well, Dad, we will always be together and be friends. And he says, but you're not scared of anything. And then here's the moment. I was today. You were? Yes, when I thought that I might lose you. He said, oh, at that moment, parent and child both were equally vulnerable. You see, relationship intimacy is when two people, minimally two people, can share a moment of equal mutual vulnerability. And it's when we both can be mutually vulnerable, when we can see each other, is when we can strengthen that level of intimacy. But what we defend against so much, again, back because of the residuals of slavery, is that we are afraid to be vulnerable because we've experienced so much hurt, pain, and disappointment and let down. And so to risk being vulnerable is to enhance our emotional intimacy availability. And this takes time. This is why it's not easy for the person to automatically leave even though the situation in the home is bad. Because it makes them emotionally vulnerable. In The Gifted Hands, how many did you see The Gifted Hands? This is about the brain surgeon, B.A. Carson, thank you. When he and his wife in the scene where she had just had a miscarriage with the twins. She's in the hospital, and he's sitting there with his hands in his face and worried about his internship. And she wakes up and she looks over at him and she says, what are you doing here? And he says, you need me, you need me. And she says very tenderly, I don't need you. I have you. Your patients need you. He said, I can go? And she nodded, she affirmed. And I remember when I saw that scene, a chill ran over me because she said, I don't need you. I have you. Confidence. They need you. Go tend to those lost sheep who need tending to. Emotional intimacy at an equal moment of mutual vulnerability. I want to close now